Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to welcome you all to this august occasion. It's the 11th annual memorial lecture of Matthew Goniwe. And I wish to acknowledge you all, our guest speaker, Dr. Naledi Pando, and the MEC of Gauteng, MEC in Education, Sports, Arts and Culture, Mr. Matume Chilwane, and the leadership at GDE, and also acknowledge the presence of the board of Matthew Goniwe and the management of Matthew Goniwe as well, and also Saibono and all our partners, and also the representatives from the SGP associations and teacher unions. And I would like to thank you all and all protocols observed, and thank you for your patience. We're about to start with a formal program, but more acknowledgements will be made as we journey throughout the program. I was just highlighting and acknowledging. You are welcome. And like I indicated earlier on, I'm with Jessica Ngobeni, a learner from Sikhululekile and SOS School. But before we move on with the program, I'll call on Jessica maybe to call the first item on the program.
Thank you, Dr. Nache. Very good afternoon again. My name is Jessica Ngubeni, and I will be co-directing with Dr. Nache. You know, one day you're just sitting on your study table using notes, accounting notes actually, and they're written Matthew Goniwe, and then the next day you're sitting on a stage and you are co-directing a program from Matthew Goniwe. 30 years of transformation in education, 30 years of revolution. Matthew Goniwe has committed itself to building capacity in different stakeholders, and I represent the RCL, and I'm a product of that capacity building from Matthew Goniwe. So with that being said, I'm a year-pa, so we're going to have more of that today. Please help me welcoming Dr. Molifi Oliphant SOS School Choir, who will be singing the national anthem for us. A round of applause, please.
The involvement of learners was deliberate, ladies and gentlemen, just to showcase the talent and the beauty that we have in our schools. Continuing with the acknowledgements, we acknowledge the Goniwe family and the entire CREDOC delegation with the formations and structures from that community in CREDOC. We are all welcomed. But more acknowledgements will be done by other speakers as they come to the podium, and they will do so as well. But it's safe to say that all protocols observed for now, but more acknowledgements will be done by the speakers. I'll call upon the Matthew Goniwe Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Spusiso Mahlangu. He's a very charismatic leader and a very energetic and hands-on. Over to you, Mr. Spusiso Mahlangu.
Thank you very much, directors. Dr. Noche, who's a colleague at Matthew Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance, and Ms. Jessica Ngubeni. Jessica, we identified her around April or so. She was doing the same kind of job for the farewell of Minister Angie Motshekga, and we like the talent. And we did say whenever then we host an event, we'll make sure that she's in the lineup. Keynote speaker, Honorable Dr. N. Pando, delighted to have you here. The MEC is on his way. We'll also acknowledge him in absentia. He will join us shortly. He had urgent matters that he needed to attend to. We also have the presence of the Goniwe family, already acknowledged by Program Director. We were hoping to see Bishop Mbulelo Goniwe. He's not yet here, but we'll acknowledge him in absentia. The delegation is led by the son of the late Matthew Goniwe, Mr. Nyaniso Goniwe. And we also wish to acknowledge Ms. Vyogazi Nkukwana, who's also a member of the Goniwe family. We also sadly pass our condolences to the family for their recent loss of Ms. Nobuzwe Goniwe, who was the daughter of Nyamega and Matthew Goniwe. Chairperson of the board, Mr. Lidimo, board members of MGSLG, we are all acknowledged. Saipono board, I'm not sure whether they are here, Mhlegazi, but CEO and your executive, we acknowledge you. Staff and management of MGSLG, we are acknowledged, and we really appreciate the effort you've put in organizing this event. The Office of the MEC, Chief of Staff, acknowledge you. Members of the Gauteng Department of Education, from leadership to general staff workers at GDE. School Governing Body Association, leadership and members who are present. Teacher unions present. Our partners in delivering and implementing our programs. I also wish to acknowledge my former colleagues who are still assisting us in the work that we do, Dr. Mlete and Dr. Naidu. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and all the time and a privilege to stand before you as we gather. Although this is the 11th lecture, every time one gets this opportunity, we just don't take it for granted. We understand the road traveled for us to be where we are. This particular occasion is a reminder of the legacy of Matthew Goniwe. Matthew Goniwe was a dynamic educator, community leader, a matri whose vision for a free and equal South Africa remains the guiding light in our society today. We come from a past of oppressive education system. It was defined by segregation, existence of 4 separate education departments. But the dawn of democracy brought about one unified system, which we're still trying to work to ensure that there is equality across the country, different classes of economic society. As we recall that the previous system was deep in inequality was deeply entrenched. There was discrimination, and it was embodying the vision of apartheid architect Hendrik Verwoerd, who famously declared that blacks should never be shown greener pastures of education, but should know their station in life as hewers of wood and drawers of water. This weight entrenched an ideology that condemned black children to a life of limited opportunity, with an education designed to keep them subservient and under-resourced. The dawn of democracy sought to reverse the devastating effects of Bantu education, which was a system that systematically denied black children access to quality education, resources, and skills. Today, as we reflect on our journey, these reforms that Department of Basic Education has introduced continue to serve as a cornerstone in our fight to provide every child, regardless of race or background, with an education that empowers them to achieve their fullest potential. As we mark this milestone, we celebrate the remarkable progress the country has made, but also acknowledge the challenges that remain. Our democracy is a living entity, and it is our collective responsibility to nurture and strengthen it for future generations. In exactly 7 days' time, 17th of October, Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance will be celebrating its 22nd birthday. It was established 17 October 2002. This institution was established out of Goniwe's enduring belief in the power of education and leadership to transform society. For over 2 decades, the MGSLG, as Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance is known, has played a pivotal role in developing leadership within our education sector, driving improvements in school through a number of interventions that we implement, and ensuring that our young people have the opportunity to thrive in a democratic South Africa. As much as the lecture is designed, or it's intended to keep the spirit and legacy of Goniwe alive, but we also take this opportunity to elevate the role of this institution as a developmental institute, which is actively repositioning itself towards becoming a higher education institution. And this transformation, we believe, reflects our commitment to expanding the impact in shaping leadership and governance in the education sector. As we transition into this new phase, the lecture is very crucial for fostering collaboration and innovative thinking that will guide the institution as it redefines itself. As the country celebrates 30 years of democracy and MGSLG 22 years of existence, it is fitting to reflect on the lessons Goniwe will have left us, which is the importance of education as the foundation of a just society, the necessity of strong leadership in building sustainable communities, and the power of the people coming together to reflect meaningful change. We also acknowledge that this event is happening at a very critical time when our government has relaunched the inquest into the tragic death of the Craddock Four. Inquest was supposed to take place about 2 weeks ago. That's when we had planned to have the lecture, but we had to postpone it so that we allow the family the opportunity to attend the inquest and be able to attend the lecture. We do trust that the inquest will provide much needed closure to the families of the Craddock Four, which is the Goniwe, Galata, Shauli, and Mkonto families, who have waited for far too long for justice and healing. It is a huge responsibility that we carry to continue with Matthew Goniwe's legacy. We should not only reflect on the past, but we must actively contribute towards shaping the future. In a time where our education system faces numerous challenges, it is incumbent upon us as corporate citizens and active community members and leaders to support initiatives that promote educational excellence and equity. I'd also like to take this moment to extend my deepest gratitude to the Goniwe family, Gauteng Department of Education, and everyone present here, and all our participants and partners for making this day possible. Your commitment in fostering an ongoing conversation about education, excellence, leadership, and equality is invaluable. As we listen to our esteemed speaker and engage in thought-provoking discussions, let us do so with a shared sense of purpose. Let us remember that Matthew Goniwe's life was dedicated to empowering others, and in that spirit, let us ask ourselves how we too can contribute to building a South Africa that is truly free, fair, and prosperous for all. Thank you very much, and I hope you will be inspired.
Thank you so much, CEO.
Thank you, Dr. Nache. Thank you, Mr. Mashangu, for the wonderful address. He did mention that we met somewhere. We were dining. I love what he said. He said we should not only reflect on the past, but we should contribute towards building a better future. And he left us with a very powerful question. What are you doing to contribute to the future of South Africa? There's the future of South Africa there at the back. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Tsidiso Lidimo, who is the MGSLG board chairperson, to give us a welcome address. A warm round of applause.
Thank you very much, program directors, Dr. Noche and Jessica. I'm quite excited that you declared that Matthew Goniwe is playing a role in what you are becoming. Seated there, I'm sure the board shares the sentiment that there's a role that we play, recognized by those who are recipients of our programs. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My task is very simple. It's just to say to you, welcome, and sit down. Let me thank the CEO really for having handled the opening item in a very excellent way in which he did. I do not want to explore the risk of not acknowledging very important people in the room. We must always do so that to ensure that the institution is carried in the public domain and gets sustainable. So in doing so, don't mind if I repeat the acknowledgements that the CEO has done, because I must do it. I must acknowledge the family, the Goniwe family, and the representatives of the structures in the Lingelihle community, and really appreciate their commitment to coming all the time to be with us as we celebrate the legacy of our icon, Matthew Goniwe. Let me also, on behalf of the board, acknowledge the presence of departmental officials, the executive of Matthew Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance and staff here present. who play a very significant role in ensuring the sustainability of the organization, the backbone of the institution. The MEC for Education, Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, we're told is on his way. The former minister in our country who has held, I think, 5 or 6 portfolios in this country, has conducted herself with a great amount of integrity and has become a role model to many of us. Dr. Naledi Pandor, we really appreciate her coming to be with us to share thoughts about what can be done to take forward the complex task of transforming our education system. We really are pleased to have her in our midst. Let me acknowledge the learners from Dr. Milif Oliphant, SOS, acknowledge your coming, and also acknowledge the teachers who are accompanying you. If teachers are empowered, we see it through the learners. And we really appreciate the efforts that those teachers are making, the conductor and others, in making sure we nurture this kind of talent. Thank you for that hard work you're doing, despite all the challenges. Let me also welcome the SGB associations. I saw 2 or 3 of them here present. The teacher unions, RCLs, here invited. I saw the CEO of Saibono, our counterpart in the training space. I am not sure if the CEO is accompanied by board members. If they are here, let me also welcome them. This is the 11th annual memorial lecture that we do to recognize the legacy of our struggle icon, one of our unsung heroes of our liberation struggle, Matthew Goniwe. When this institution was born in 2002, it was when an idea arose that, given that we had come into the new dispensation, how do we bridge the backlogs? The idea was born of a training institution, and those who were there at the time took it upon themselves to name this institution after Matthew Goniwe. It couldn't have been much more appropriate than that, because he was a teacher by profession, and this institution's mandate was, among others, to develop teachers and deal with the training backlogs that we have had. That we have had teachers with standard 5 who could stand before a classroom and teach, because of the deliberate apartheid regime which ensured that we do not receive quality public education. Now, the new government has had to deal with that aspect, upskill them, make them much more competent, so that as they mediate teaching and learning, they empower those learners, so we produce patriotic and productive learners. So it was a huge task. 6 years after the birth of our democracy, 2002. It was a very huge task. And from that time on, the institution has been traversing this difficult path, nurturing, shaping its programs, change of leadership, change of the board, change of MECs over time, from the then Mary Metcalf and others, all of whom really indicated that the education system needs such an institution, including the current MEC, who so much believes in the institution, its role in ensuring that we continue to train and develop our teachers, school management teams, school governing bodies, district officials, RCLs, and so on. So we take a moment each time every year to reflect on the gains and the setbacks that we have had. But because we are not an isolated entity, we do so and invite valuable stakeholders in the education system to put what we do in the public domain, but also share thoughts from others, as you would hear from the MEC later, from the keynote speaker later. What are the thoughts, current thoughts about the education transformation trajectory in our country? What must be done moving forward? Over time, the board took a very deliberate decision in endorsing the values that will guide this institution. Deliberate because we understand that we carry a very big name, and that as we carry our mandate, we've got to be able to at least emulate what Matthew Goniwe sought to do. Those who were with him and those who read about him always come to a conclusion that he was a disciplinarian, that he was a prolific maths and science teacher, that he was not just a teacher but a community leader. So he believed in collaboration. He carried himself with integrity at all times, a revolutionary professional, because he understood that his task was not just X and Y in maths, but the ultimate was to liberate ourselves from the shackles of apartheid. And he did that task diligently. So you'll find some of the values that I've mentioned in our books. These are values that we have approved: collaboration, integrity, professionalism, Ubuntu. Those are the values that the institution has carried, at least up to now, to ensure that we keep the legacy alive. We have sought to make ourselves the leading training and development institute in the country and beyond. And in everything that we do under the leadership of the CEO is to ensure that we live up to that particular vision of becoming a leading training institute in the country and beyond. Currently, programs are offered in Gauteng, but we have resolved that we must expand in our efforts to becoming this leading training institute, expand our services into other provinces and become a national institute. Work has been done in that direction, and we're hoping we're traversing that route successfully. Not only did we resolve on that question, we resolved on a very important question, that we must evolve into becoming a higher education and training institution. And work has been started in that direction. The coming into life of the Bella Bill brings additional huge responsibilities on government to provide resources so that we ensure that grade R is brought into the mainstream. There's a lot of work in that area. Training of practitioners, infrastructure, and a whole range of other things that must be done. We believe that Matthew Goniwe will occupy that particular space, especially the issue of training the practitioners and developing a formal qualification that will attain, which will make them professionals in the system. So this is how we have evolved as an institution, and we take this moment to interact with you, in sharing ideas about how best we can traverse this route collectively, in ensuring that the challenges that we still have, many of whom are stemming from the legacy of apartheid, can be overcome in a collaborative effort with Matthew Goniwe at the center of that education transformation drive. So as we gather tonight, we hope that the keynote address will empower all of us so that we consider new ideas as we reposition the institution into becoming a fully fledged higher education institution. The timing could not have been much more appropriate. October is a month where the world is celebrating teachers. And we're celebrating this teacher in October. It couldn't have been much more appropriate. And the running theme for the current period is value the voices of the teachers, which is what we seek to do all the time, so that we understand their needs and respond to their needs, so that we can be able to help them produce productive citizens and patriotic citizens. So, as we converge this evening or this afternoon, we believe that this lecture, among other ventures that the organization undertakes, to put it in the public domain, to share ideas, to innovate, will be part of the ventures that help us, all of us, to understand the current challenges and what needs to be done moving forward. And doing so, I wish that this memorial lecture be fruitful and that you will find it worth having come here as we depart later this evening. Welcome.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Chair. And I know there's this other chap. We corrected the other day, myself and my other team members, to say, we don't say chair, we say chairperson. Yeah. Thank you so much, chairperson. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been welcomed and we must relax now. And we've all been acknowledged and we've been given the purpose of us holding these memorial lectures. And surely it has been mentioned that we are forging new partnerships and trying to reposition Matthew Goniwe to have this national footprint and also as an HEI. And also make sure that the legacy of Matthew Goniwe as one of the great teachers lives on. And it reminds me, as I was once a teacher sometime, it's a really fulfilling career, but also challenging at times. I remember one day I asked one learner, hey, where's my homework? And he said, say, I lost your homework whilst I was fighting with this other kid because he was saying we are the worst teacher in the school. And I was disarmed. How can you fight such a person who's in your corner? And as they said, Matthew Goniwe was a maths and science teacher. I come from that group of teachers. One wrote to me, dear sir, please stop asking us to find your ex. She's never coming back. And please don't ask us why. Thank you so much. At this point, I would like to call upon the choir to render a few items as well. Over to you, choir. Can we give them a round of applause as they come on stage? Thank you so much.
No, Mungalona
Ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, I would like to call on stage the son of Matthew Goniwe and the family representative, Mr. Nyaniso Goniwe, to come on stage.
Good evening, everybody. As some of you might know, I'm the son of the struggle hero and the giant, Matthew Goniwe. I'm here representing the Goniwe family and leading the CRADOC delegation that's present. I want to say it has been such an honor to be part of this wonderful event. And on behalf of the Goniwe family and the rest of the broader delegation, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Matthew Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance, MEC, the chairman, the board, CEO, EXCO, and the management, esteemed guests, and a host of dignitaries that are part of this grand occasion. They say gratitude is not only the greatest virtue, but the parent of them all. Our relationship with the school has been one of honor and dignity. We want to cultivate and grow this relationship as long as can be, and long may it continue. When you talk about Matthew Goniwe, we talk about a man with many sides, multifaceted giant with many skills. There's Matthew the father, Matthew the husband, Matthew the revolutionary, Matthew the teacher, Matthew the activist. But one of the things he loved to do in that arsenal of skills is to be a teacher. One of Nelson Mandela's famous quotes about education is, "The power of education extends beyond the development of skills we need for economic success. It can contribute to nation building and reconciliation." I believe Matthew had the same dream and aspirations about the future of this country. He believed the sharpest weapon we can use to bring about change is education. And with joining those two things, activism and education, he would become a dangerous adversary for the apartheid government and would one day free us from their shackles. As many of you know, this year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of democracy in South Africa. This is a big milestone in this country. And in striving and aiming at achieving bigger things, we must focus on education. And that there's a relationship between education and democracy. What is the relationship between education and democracy? The understanding of how democracy and education intertwine first starts with learning what democracy actually means. Democracy is how we work within our community, how people come together and make decisions that affect the community as a whole. This requires education. Educated individuals are whom you should want to make decisions needed to keep the community on the right path. But how do you gain information? We have the opportunity to learn and experience things every day. The more we learn and experience, the more educated we become. Thus, the more educated we have, the more democratic you have lived. You have experienced and adjusted to your community. Education can create knowledgeable citizens for voting and a competent leader to be voted for. It can eradicate any form of corruption. It can promote individual differences, but at the same time preserve common values. So as a young nation, let's commit to use education to better and be resilient. We need to endeavor to be not just activists, but activists for education. Because in doing so, we can transform our country from a nation with potential to a nation that reaches their goals. Thank you.
A warm round of applause My heart is racing, and I'm sure everyone went through the emotions of their own. You know, I would like to call on the MEC. We have addressed by the MEC an introduction of the speaker, who's Dr. Naledi Pandor. I just have to mention that I was with Mr. Matumechilwane on February when we were launching our school. And I will never forget that day because there was cake on that day. And so, because there was cake and we are a lot in the school, we knew we are not going to get that cake. But I was Mr. Matumi's escort on that day. And I was with another learner. And he said, no, no, come, 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 come. And he called us. He was having cake. And we said, Mr. Matumi is calling us. And he said, no, have cake, guys, have cake. Have cake. And he gave us cake. So I just really had to share that to show. And I hope we never get tired of telling Matthew Goniwe's story. I hope we never get tired of that. As much as we are building the future, looking to the future, but I hope that we always have moments like this, where we look to the past, where we remember him, and where we share the story each and every day. Ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming Mr. Matume Chilwane up to the stage.
I don't have cake today. But I would have loved to share the cake. Thank you so much, program directors. I would want to firstly start by really apologizing for time. I had one of those days where it was just everything on top of the other. I just came back from a family of that deputy principal that was shot on Tuesday. Is it on Tuesday? He was shot while busy with the process and investigation in the school, in one of our schools. So he had gone to retrieve the evidence, the laptop that was stolen from him. And he never made it back to the school and not at home as well. So this was a man of integrity, Deputy Principal Sipho Ntlengetho. And these are teachers that when you speak about Matthew Goniwe, you can speak about their names as well in these times. So I'd gone to just share our condolences with the family and really provide support. It's not easy. It's not easy. This was an educator who was committed, really, really, really committed. To quote his son, he says, "Ubaba Mbogo umuntu straight. Umuntu straight, angafuni into is wrong." That's how he describes his father. And for him to lose his life because there was of this case. But we have trust in the police, we have trust in our law enforcement, and we believe that the perpetrators will be apprehended soon, as soon as possible, because we can't allow that, especially in our schools or related to our schools. The program directors of the day, thank you very much. The Premier in absentia, but he did indicate that if time permits, he will make his way here. Our esteemed guest of honor and our keynote speaker, a veteran of our struggle for global justice and liberation, a former minister and current chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Dr. Naledi Pandor, chairperson and board members of Matthew Goniwe, the senior leadership of the Department of Education, the Goniwe family present here, academics from various research centers, the CEO of Matthew Goniwe, Mahlangu, and the CEO of Saibono, Prof. Nzobi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Sanbonani, Molweni, Towela, Abshin, Nda, eh? King? Mpere? Oli Peril. All Peril. Let me start by firstly congratulating our team, Matthew Goniwe, which is the driving force behind this event, for the level of effort and care that clearly went into organizing this annual Matthew Goniwe Memorial Lecture under a befitting theme, challenges and opportunities for education transformation in contested contexts, and further to be delivered by an outstanding keynote speaker. The place for education in society has been a subject of debate since time immemorial. How we contribute to this debate is inextricably linked to what and for whom we believe education is for. Whatever the choice, the implications have often stretched well beyond the walls of our schools and universities, denoting the need for us to shoulder a lot more care and responsibility in the views we advocate for, the values we choose to promote or demote, the interest we choose to advance or overlook. As Marie Baptiste eloquently articulated in her work, Decolonizing Education, she said, nourishing the learning spirit. She said that education is inherently influenced by the cultural and societal frameworks from which it emerges. She notes further that education, like institutions and societies it derives from, it is neither culturally neutral nor fair. Education has its roots in patriarchal, Eurocentric society, complicit with multiple forms of oppression of women, sometimes men, children, minorities, and indigenous people. It is therefore what we do with education and not education in and of itself will inform the role in our context. The field of education, therefore, offers an ideal space to study the different and yet mutually reinforcing ways through which social injustice can be both advanced and resisted. Professor Morala reminds us that the success of a developmental state will depend on our ability to unleash the full scientific, industrial, and creative capabilities of South African society. The fundamentals of this revolution must always be consistent with the aims of our developmental state, economic competitiveness, and societal well-being. Therefore, Mepando, as Gauteng, we know too well that a trained, capable, and industrial youthful population is a precondition to our prospects for any form of success. The Matthew Goniwe Memorial Lecture always serves as a stark reminder that without a more purposeful, measurable, and deliberate investment in young people's ideas, this continent, this country, and this province is headed nowhere slowly. Here at home and elsewhere in the world, education is up against a myriad of societal challenges. Poverty continues to be a moving target, worsened by a debt dilemma. According to the United Nations Development Programme, 52 countries, 40% of the developing world, are in serious debt trouble. Rather than default, some countries are having to trade off investment in health and education to the detriment of the current and future generation. Some 3.3 billion people now live in countries where debt interest payments exceed spending on health or education. In the words of Professor Guy Standing, says the 20th century income distribution system has broken down. Its collapse has given rise to a society consisting of millions of people facing unstable, insecure labor, a lack of occupational identity, declining and increasingly volatile real wages, loss of benefits, and chronic indebtedness. Our economies have become hostage to recurring financial crises, shocks, uncertainty, and lack of predictability. We know from the work of economists such as Thomas Piketty and Joseph Stiglitz that today the share of income going to the global 10% is now 38% higher than the average income to the bottom 50% of the population. Against this backdrop of deepening disparities, discontent, and distrust, democratic governments the world over, including ours, are at crossroads. The knock-on effects are being felt more acutely by the most vulnerable groups of our society. Program Director, this is what our education system is up against. Surely, with this background in mind, education can no longer be education for education purposes. In line with the teachings of Matthew Goniwe, this education has to serve a much higher purpose, that of a just, equitable, and humane society. Today, we reflect on Goniwe's impact that reached beyond the walls of classrooms and echoes through the corridors of our history. In Craddock, he led not just as an educator, but as an architect of a community, turning schools into spaces of liberation and empowerment. He awakened the minds of young people, showing them that knowledge is not only power, but a path to freedom. But Matthew Goniwe was not content with mere words. He moved with action. He understood that unity is strength, and that true change begins when communities rise together. He was a leader who inspired people to stand not as individuals, but as one force shaking the foundations of an unjust system. Lastly, here in Gauteng, our problems are many. The force of urbanization and its key drivers continue to shape both human and non-human activity in ways that can neither be avoided nor slowed down. As a result, 63% of the population already lives in urban areas, a figure that is expected to rise to 71% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. In other words, by 2050, 8 out of 10 South Africans will be living in urban areas. Our odds of achieving a livable, safe, resource-efficient, just, and equitable urban development are thus inextricably linked to the ability of our cities to anticipate, manage, and respond to urbanization trends, challenges, and opportunities. If we are to reindustrialize or beneficiate our resources, we need to carefully study the way our towns and cities are shaping up. In short, whether we are teaching agriculture, town planning, logistics, mining, manufacturing, IT, or related sectors, there is a need for a spatial response to the social, economic, and political realities of an increasingly urbanized Gauteng. Dr. Paundo, through your life, we know that given half the chance, the girl child has an unlimited potential to excel in all areas of human endeavor. Any society worth its salt shall, therefore, double its investment in young women. As Gauteng, we will lead the way in this regard. An investment in young girls and women in general is, of course, an investment in all of society. You invest in a woman, you future-proof any nation. This year, we aren't merely celebrating past achievements. who are setting the stage for the next generation. Our partnerships with Matthew Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance and other collaborators, they are catalysts for transformation, igniting excellence in our schools and communities. From expanding ICT programs to strengthening our focus on literacy, numeracy, and critical thinking skills, we are ensuring that no child is left behind. We are building not only schools, but future. In this milestone year, we reaffirmed our commitment to making education a pillar of equity and an opportunity for all. Each new classroom we build, each program we launch, and every support system we create is a promise to our young people that their future is bright and their potential is limitless. And as we stand at this critical juncture, I'm reminded of the words of our former president, Thabo Mbeki, when he says, "It is small things that we do that will make big things happen." It is in this very lesson that we taught, every book we opened, every child is inspired, that we'll see the true power of our efforts unfold. Let us carry forward the torch led by Matthew Goniwe, embodying his spirit in our actions as we strive for a better, more equitable world. For that, I thank you. And it is on this note that I take this opportunity to call on someone who is no stranger to us all. Dr. Naledi Pandor is a South African former Minister of International Relations and Cooperation from 2019 to 2024. Dr. Pandor became an MP in 1994, has amassed impressive experience in position of public office, including Deputy Chief Whip of the ANC in the National Assembly, and served as the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces and its Chairperson subsequently. Dr. Pandor has a PhD from the University of Pretoria, of which I'm also an alumni. So, serious universities. An honorary doctorate from Cape Peninsula University of Technology, University of Stellenbosch, University of Lisbon in Portugal, and the University College of Dublin in Ireland. Upon being awarded Germany's highest federal award, the Grand Cross of Merit, the German ambassador to South Africa, Walter Lindner, said, "Dr. Pandor is for us a symbol of the new South Africa, modern, innovative, dedicated to scientific progress, and also an outstanding female leadership." Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, may we rise to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Naledi Pandor.
Being a former Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, and thus responsible for diplomacy, I am not allowed to say things like protocol is observed. I have to say, MEC Chilwani, the chairperson of the Board of Trustees of the Matthew Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance, the CEO of the Matthew Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance, all trustees, all leaders of public institutions, distinguished guests who join us today, and most importantly, the family of Matthew Goniwe and the delegation from Cradock, a town and village that my grandfather, Z.K. Matthews, loved, and my whole family. distinguished ladies and gentlemen, scholars present today, good afternoon to you all. It's a wonderful pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm somewhat disrupted in my lecture because some of which I wished to say has been repeated by several speakers before me. However, I've learned through experience that something good repeated is a necessary event, and thus I will not neglect to reiterate some of the matters that have been referred to today. Allow me to begin. Matthew Goniwe, as you have been told, is well known as one of the bravest sons of South Africa. He's most renowned as one of the Cradock Four who bravely gave up their lives as murdered martyrs for the freedom of the oppressed people of South Africa. Goniwe was born in 1947 in Cradock, in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. He matriculated from Heeltown, and the reference to that will become important later, and studied for a teacher's diploma at the historic University of Fort Hare. He taught in Cradock after qualifying, and it is said in biographies of him that he was a much-loved teacher. While serving as a teacher, he led community struggles in Cradock, fighting for the rights of his community and all oppressed people. He was a teacher, a leader, also a member of the United Democratic Front, and served in the underground structures of the South African Communist Party and Umkhonto weSizwe, the real Umkhonto weSizwe. His leadership and robust activism attracted the interest of the security police, and he lived under constant surveillance and threat. He was murdered by the apartheid police following a meeting with his comrades, Derek Swartz, who you saw in the film just now, as well as Michael Coetzee. In June 1985, he was abducted along with his comrades, Fort Galata, Sparrow Mkhonto, and Sicelo Mhlauli. And all Cradock Four were brutally murdered by the apartheid police. I refer to this history because I worry sometimes that as South Africans, we are neglecting our history. And history is important for us to have a consciousness of who we are, and thus to conduct ourselves in a manner appropriate to the heroes and heroines who gave up their lives for us. The reason some of us behave badly, steal public money, don't provide proper services, is because we've forgotten or neglect our history. If we recalled every day the sacrifices of persons such as Matthew Goniwe, we would be ashamed to steal. We would be ashamed to fail our people. So I repeat the history always so that we may remember, internalize, and act in accord. South African History Online reports that when Nelson Mandela visited the gravesite of the Cradock Four on the 10th anniversary of their deaths, he said the following: "The death of these gallant freedom fighters marked a turning point in the history of our struggle. No longer could the regime govern in the old way. These were the true heroes of the struggle." This brief outline tells us of the hero we celebrate today. We can never thank them sufficiently, but we can honor them by continuing their tradition of revolutionary struggle for fundamental change. I turn now to reflect on the matter of the influence of conflicts on transitions, because I believe very, very sincerely that even though we're celebrating 30 years of freedom, we are still a society in transition. We haven't got to where we wish to be. Many societies that have experienced colonial oppression face the task of education transformation once they achieve freedom. Vietnam, for example, had to overcome imposed regional divisions between North and South that had been entrenched by different colonial regimes. The war between North and South, which was essentially a war between American soldiers and Vietnam dissidents funded by America, was a particularly vicious war for millions of Vietnamese. That war sowed deep anger among citizens and enforced separation on communities and families. Added to this dimension of war was the imposition of colonial languages for official communication, for schooling, and for governance. A further consequence of oppression in Vietnam was irrelevant education, poor skills basis, and inadequate industrial and productive capacity in a formerly oppressed nation. On our own continent of Africa, we are aware of the barriers created by colonial geographic boundaries. Linked to these were the colonizing effects of different religious sects and the imposition on us as Africans of colonial languages. Me ka gore ha re sa tlhola re tshwana, ka gore re bua maleme a mantši, ka gore ha re utlwane sentle, ke bua leleme la kwa. In Southern Africa, we somewhat benefited from a common imperialist overlord. English became the lingua franca for most of our countries, making it easier in Southern Africa to communicate with our colonial masters in England and with our fellow Africans, for example, in East Africa, and rendering it near impossible to communicate with French-speaking West Africa or Spanish-speaking Guinea and Portuguese-speaking Angola. These colonial legacies pose intricate challenges for Pan-African ambitions, for goals such as African unity, for our desire for a continental legislative institution, and our great ambitions of an Africa continental free trade area. All these noble ambitions become practically improbable given the legacies of our colonial experience. The challenges become particularly complex for our inherited post-colonial education systems and our desire to transform them so they support our development goals. Our country, South Africa, has had to grapple with these constraints too. Some of you here might not recall that our hero, Matthew Goniwe, and those he worked with led a gallant struggle against something called Bantu education. Before reflecting on these challenges, I wish to refer briefly to apartheid, because you're forgetting that too. You forget it so much that some of you say things were better under apartheid. I wish you had lived under it, you would never say that. The concept apartheid features less frequently in our intellectual discourses, despite its very visible imprint on our inherited legacies. As many analysts and historians remind us, such as Jakes Gerwel, Chika Sihule of University of Pretoria, racial oppression and discrimination in South Africa existed for many, many centuries before the imposition of statutory apartheid in 1948. Racial oppression consisted of the denial of citizenship to Black people in South Africa, of racially oppressive laws, and of practices in all social sectors that diminished us, as well as constant exploitation of Black people as cheap and unskilled labor. The imposition of formal statutory apartheid or legal racial separation by the National Party government in 1948 merely formalized and intensified what had existed for centuries. The education of Black people had been neglected and restricted for many decades. Thus you had, in the late 19th century, African intellectuals, clergy, and traditional authorities coming together to establish missionary schools and training centers for teachers and priests to offer access to education for a small number of Black learners who were really somewhat of the social Black elite who enjoyed that initial access. For decades, these missionary schools were the critical education resource for Black youth. And while the colonial imprint continued, these young people flowered the early growth of popular resistance from these education institutions. You had leaders and pioneers such as J.T. Jabavu, John Knox Bokwe, Chekedi Khama, and many others who emerged from these schools and training centers. It is interesting that these schools with the colonial imprint produce revolutionaries. I don't know what kind of people our schools are producing today, but under the worst racism, the best were produced. And so we need to ask what it is we are not doing, which is leading to us inculcating poor practices, attitudes, and ethics. Now, when the National Party came to office in 1948, they recognized the impact of resistance that these still few and limited missionary schools and colleges were having on Black attitudes and aspirations. Colleges such as Tiger Kloof and a few others, Lovedale, had been joined by the University College of Fort Eyre, which offered university education to young Black men from 1916. Observing the graduation of young black people, beginning with my grandfather, Z.K. Matthews, in 1924, the apartheid state decided it could not tolerate education institutions that gave black people ideas that were not aligned to the low station in life that apartheid had designated for them. Thus began, in the early 1950s, the nefarious plan to lower the quality of education for black people and only permit education that would render trainees suitable employees of white oppressors. The grand plan for this was codified as the Bantu Education Act of 1953. It was preceded by active destruction of the established mission schools and a range of prohibitions that intensified the active implementation of apartheid Bantu education. The main architects of Bantu education, Iceland and Verwoerd, made it clear in their policy speeches that skills opportunities for black people would be limited and that disciplines such as mathematics and science would be forbidden. So, Dr. Noche, you are unusual in being a mathematician. A key aspect of the new education policies, as I referred to in our societies in transition, a key aspect was the enhanced division of black people into ethnically and linguistically segregated schools that increased black separation and allowed for intense tensions between oppressed communities, especially in the metropolitan areas. Bantu education policy tended to be presented as an opportunity for relevant education for black people, and rarely as active denial of a full, comprehensive education. So the policymakers, the apartheid rulers would say to us, we are doing this to improve you. We are making you learn in your language so that you are happy in your community. Because you're only going to live in your township, you're not going anywhere else. So we want you to be able to live there successfully. And when you're in your township, you're not going to need science, you won't need mathematics, so we're not going to allow you to learn those subjects. So they shaped us in inequity. And the challenge of transformation is we must resist that inequity and fight it fundamentally. The cruel imposition of Bantu education in schools came to be regarded as incomplete by the apartheid state, as colleges, particularly Fort Hare University then, still offered an empowering education experience to young students. Just think about it for a moment. It is Fort Hare University that produced Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Thabo Mbeki. So there must have been something about it, that you have a pot that produces such leadership. Also, the non-racial character of the university college was seen as impertinent by the apartheid state. They said, these blacks, they think they're something. Why are they studying with Indians, coloreds, and whites? We're going to stop this. Consequently, in 1959, the apartheid parliament approved the falsely named Extension of University Education Act. Apartheid state was very clever. they would name legislation not in terms of its intention, but name it in a manner to fool us to believe they were doing something good for us. So many thought extension of university meant we'd get more and better universities. But here was the plot. This legislation would make Fort Hare a tribal Xhosa university, only for Xhosa-speaking students. And later, the University of Zululand was created for isiZulu-speaking students. And later, the University of the North for those who spoke Sepedi and other languages in the north of our country. This was all part of the social engineering grand plan of apartheid. And as often happened, it bred compliance initially and then resistance, because people came to understand what the true intention of this legislation was. I am reiterating this detail because I don't want you to expect me to draw out the tasks you must undertake. I want you to understand the history, its intentions, and thus its directives on what we as free South Africans need to attend to. We can't be ethnic. We can't be linguistic chauvinists. That was what apartheid intended. That doesn't mean we don't respect our languages, we don't use them, but we cannot use them as a means of exclusion or diminution of other languages, because that is what they wanted. One important reality of this history is the fact that apartheid education provision prioritized urban townships, as I referred to earlier, and severely neglected rural communities. This fact has also resulted in very severe challenges for the democratic state, challenges that we've not yet sufficiently responded to. So I've now provided you with a cursory overview of the apartheid imprint on education in South Africa. While all education in our country was affected, the impact on the education of Black people was particularly disastrous. Time does not allow for detail on the Bantu education curriculum prescriptions and its severe shortcomings, nor on the training or lack of training of teachers, nor on the denial of numeracy and scientific access, and nor on the use of Black education inspectors to enforce Bantu education doctrines. Just a word on curriculum prescriptions. One of my colleagues who attended school in schools that had the enforced Bantu education curriculum told me she was shocked to realize when she was much older and able to read that they had used the same reading text from sub A up to grade standard 5 at school. No change in textbook. That's how limited the education was. Useful reading, should you want to go into more detail on some of these aspects, might be found in the short stories of Njabulo Ndebele in the collection Fools, or the excellent expositions, which are very true to life, in the writing of Eskia Mphahlele. Students of Black consciousness fully understand the impact of racism on individual and societal consciousness. The mental effects of self-doubt are fully described by Steve Biko in I Write What I Like. all these features of apartheid education and more formed the legacy that we inherited in 1994. So when you read our analysts who are criticizing us for lack of progress, and it's true, there have been many failings. But if they do not quote this history and its impact, they are dishonest analysts, because this history had an effect and continues to do so today. I firmly believe that our 30 years of democracy has recorded impressive progress in education change in South Africa. I acknowledge freely that there remain many challenges, but the strides we have made are noteworthy. First, the freely elected government, led by President Mandela, boldly introduced 10 years of compulsory education for all children. This, I believe, was a bold beginning, and it has achieved progress in that near universal access to education has been achieved in our first 30 years of democracy. There are many naysayers on this one, and I remind them that in Britain, they adopted the Magna Carta in 1200, their first constitution, 1200, 1200. They introduced compulsory education for all children in 1944. We introduced it within the first 2 years of our democracy. It was a bold and important step. This compulsory policy adopted by government was linked to a massive school building program which accelerated infrastructure provision for education in the first 2 decades of our democracy, particularly and most importantly in our rural communities. In addition, a wide-scale reform of curricula was initiated and implemented to modernize the content of subjects and of teaching in our schools. Fourth, extensive efforts were made to improve investment in education through attempting to have smaller classes, more teachers, more libraries, and laboratories for science and technology in our schools. Of course, not all has been achieved as yet, but certainly we can identify those schools in which these changes have occurred. Fifth, the entry of larger numbers of learners vastly increased the number of learners completing secondary school and proceeding to write the matriculation and then today the senior certificate examinations. My father once said to me, Naledi, we knew almost everybody who was going to be writing matric when we were at school in our days. And today you're talking of 500,000 writing. I can't believe the change of democracy. So we have made these strides. But our education legacy that I've spoken to extensively presented democratic South Africa with a significant skills deficit, especially in non-traditional skills such as in health sciences, in engineering, in economics, in statistics, and in natural and physical sciences. The previous policy of denying access to advanced mathematics or even basic mathematics meant that thousands of school leavers were only able to access humanities and social science degrees in post-secondary education. Whenever I mention this point, I get into trouble with those in the creative sectors because they think I'm criticizing the creative sector. I'm not. We have to acknowledge that the imprint of apartheid denied us significant numbers of engineers, of statisticians, of economists. It's a fact. It's not a negative toward humanities or social sciences. But humanities and social sciences are not the only skills that will help us achieve the changes that our country is desperately in need of. Even in the technology-focused Technicon program offerings, when we had Technicons in the past, before the mergers of post-secondary institutions, we found that these Technicons, whose remit was technology, offered administration programs and management because these were easier to offer and teach, rather than offering subjects in technology and innovation. Further disadvantages also arose from our reality of 23 universities only for an increasing youth population and insufficient opportunities for the training of artisans. Oddly, for many of our parents and even us as students, artisan training is regarded as low-class training. Many parents do not want their children to be plumbers, to be electricians, to be carpenters, or to do any of the artisan programs that are offered in our colleges. Well, I can tell you this week, I moved into a house I've just recently completed fixing up. And I paid a lot of money to a carpenter, and a lot of money to a tiler, and a lot of money to a painter. So you better rethink your attitude to artisan education. And really do not frame us as a people to be trained in theology, sociology, or social work. Imagine us differently. These challenges we all face present, in my view, welcome but difficult opportunities for us in post-apartheid South Africa. Our government has had to expand higher education providers and to diversify post-secondary education institutions. And I'm very excited at the changes I see in our colleges of technical and vocational education. The narrow scope of university disciplines has been broadened to incorporate technology studies and to expand science and engineering. In fact, just this morning, I was speaking, I don't know, why people can't leave me alone. I'm a retired old lady. But I was speaking at a higher education conference. And I was mentioning to them the value of our early investments in science, when everybody thought we were crazy to invest in centers of excellence, and said to us, put the money in this building or that building. And we said, no, we want to have 100 centers of excellence in South Africa because science will advance our society. And one of those centers of excellence was the center that identified the COVID variant Omicron. So our early investment paid off. So it's important that as we grow our disciplinary fields, we do not neglect science and engineering. We also, as a new democratic government, offered opportunities in the public sector for skilled Black graduates. And our private sector opened up to black professionals. This meant, for many of us, teaching as a career lost its shine, and our government had to step in through creating the Funza Lishaka bursary program to encourage more young people to take up the education profession, the most noble profession in the world. I believe there are still many more opportunities that we must address. The quality of our education system has failed to overcome the poor performance levels we had under Bantu education. Large numbers of learners leave primary school unable to read for meaning, unable to do basic mathematics, and lacking effective writing ability. Our government has intensified efforts to address these failings, and yet the impact remains worrying. I wonder how many of you as parents allow your children to read to you every day when they come home from school or when you come back home from work or from duties you may have been performing. We need to rebuild the link between family and the school child, the link between family and school in the community. It is the only way that we will turn around the performance of our young people. A revolutionary teacher, such as Matthew Goniwe, would have invested great efforts in seeking to establish the reasons for such inadequacy. But sadly, I see little research devoted to these problems by our leading revolutionary organizations. I am sure that Matthew Goniwe, if his students were failing mathematics and science, would have wanted to find out what concept don't they understand. Why can't they find Dr. Noche's X? Why can't they understand? Why can't they understand the function of Y? Why do they not get X squared and what it means? Why don't they understand the interesting character of an isosceles triangle? I'm sure he would have been worried. And when our Pearls studies, the tests that our primary school children do, when they announce the results every few years, when our primary schools do the tests, I wonder how many teachers of reading actually say, I'm going to find out, what am I doing wrong? Why are my children not able to read? Let me link up with the university. Let me ask MEC Chilwani to get university academics into my school to help me understand what's actually going on. I don't wish to merely be a subject of investigation or poor results. I, as a teacher, I, as a principal, wish to be in a school that is an agent of change. And if we investigate sufficiently, if we as parents take on a role of seeking to assist our schools to achieve good results, we will begin to see a change. But as long as we treat ourselves as external observers of what is happening in our society, we're not going to change our country. Apartheid didn't cater. All of us were its subject. All of us were oppressed. We now need to be involved. We now need to seek out answers. I want us to depart from this notion that we have that the government will do everything. Can you imagine if Matthew Goniwe had said, hey, Dizobela, apartheid is apa, izolungisa indaba ekredok. We have got to be actors in society. And this notion, and it must be something we change, that our governing party, the ANC, can do everything, it's a wrong notion. It is us as actors in society who will influence the change. I believe there's also massive opportunity for radical improvement and transformation of rural-based education. It is in this aspect that decolonizing education could begin. The demand for decolonization of education seeks refreshed, relevant, quality content of Africa and the South, seeks teaching approaches that synthesize technology and mentoring, seek a link that acknowledges Pan-Africanism as a critical force for the regeneration of Africa. This hatred that we have for ourselves, by our hatred for fellow Africans from other countries, is something we have to stop. We've got to look at how we improve the whole of our continent, what role we can play as South Africa, because we're one of the countries that is the wealthiest, the most industrialized on the continent, and we have lessons to offer others so that they improve too. They develop their productive capacity, and then there are reasons for their citizens to remain in their country and just visit us and go back. But if we don't play a role in developing the rest of Africa, we're going to continue to hate each other and complain. I believe our new approaches and policy of the next 30 years should practically throw off the shackles of colonialism, should embrace our African identity, and should center our education practice on the realization of the African Union's ambitious Agenda 2063 and the realization of the goals of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Matthew Goniwe and his comrades would expect much more of us than the reproduction of slightly amended norms of colonial practice. They would expect fearless, challenging, brave, and innovative graduates from our schools, our colleges, and our universities. Graduates carving a new place of pride for Africa, rather than merely bemoaning a past history. I can almost hear Goniwe and Biko calling on us, rise above history, rise above legacy. Thank you very much for listening to me.
You are not even qualified to paraphrase or summarize what you have said.
Definitely.
Yeah, service emotion.
Thank you. And I'm sure Dr. Pandor, receiving a gift was also not in your speech. So we would like to present you with this gift to show our admiration, our appreciation. Matthew Goniwe is presenting you with this gift. Please treasure it and just know that you're my role model and you're standing on business. And I remember I was talking to one of the female RCLs when I was saying that the E in Naledi stands for excellence and educated. Educated. So please do accept this gift. Thank you. A warm round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Dr. Molefi Oliphant. Thank you so much. We're about to reach the end of the program. I would like to call on Ms. Lorraine Makula, who is the director of MGSLG Board of Directors, who will be doing our vote of thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming Ms. Makula.
Good afternoon, everybody. Le kae? Re teng. Ke thome ka go leboga Dr. Molefi School Choir. You've really had us entertained. Thank you very much. I'm really honored to deliver a vote of thanks on behalf of the Matthew Goniwe board. And firstly, ke leboge the program directors, Jessica Ngobeni and Dr. Noche. You really conducted the whole event in a very, very special way. Thank you very much. A round of applause for two of them. I'm going to speak in Xhosa. And allow me to do it, please. Ke Mopedi, but I'm going to do it. Ndibulele usapho laka Goniwe ngokuzimzamaza elitheko lokubuyisela galela amabheleka lama dabukele lamadala kufa ekukhuleleni isizwe esinsudu. Ndibulela insapho zwakaXalatha, Mhlawuli, Mkhondo, uthando lwenu lokuba nathi namhlanje luyaqongeka kakhulu. Ningadinwa bantwana abahle. Lento ingani namhlanje. Kamako. Esmopedi kilikile kamata MEC. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude on behalf of the board of Directors of MGSL in our keynote speaker, Dr. Naledi Pandor, for gracing us with her esteemed presence and sharing the inspiring words with us. You are greatly appreciated. And there's a lot to learn, young kids. Students that were here, it is a privilege. When you think about Melrose Arc, think about the speech that was given by Dr. Naledi Pandor. So you have something to think about. Every time you see Melrose Arc, you've got something to think about what she said about your future. Special thanks to our shareholders, to our shareholder, MEC, Matume Chilwane. Oh, he's gone. Rale Boga, Homenagane. And to each and every other person who's here, we'd like to say thank you. But most of all, we'd like to say thank you to the Matthew Goniwe staff, the CEO, well, you know, whatever it is that you've come up with regarding this event, there's a lot of behind the scenes that happened that you actually showed us that you are capable and that you could come up with an event like this one. And for that, we are forever grateful. And I would like to say to everybody that is here, Lebantle gagolo, re a leboga. Enjoy yourself and safe travel home.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our program and would like to take this opportunity and thank you for being a wonderful audience.
Halala, Matthew Goniwe, halala. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure directing the program for you.